episode 105 of the Inside the Mind podcast, and I'm privileged to be joined by Chris Spring, who's not only one of the most talented bobsled pilots I think in Canada, but also one of the more charismatic. And kind of going through your social media and a lot of the past interviews that you had, you kind of really do speak open about the mental side of things. I remember specifically the interview you had after Pyeongchang, I think it was, and just being frustrated and everything. When you think about just the mental side of things, and someone were to come to you and just say, like, the mental side of sports, the mental side of being an athlete, what's kind of like the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, I often hear of being an athlete at a world-class level. We hear a lot from people that say that at this level, 99% of it is mental, because everyone is everyone are great athletes at that level, and the thing that separates the people from being successful and perhaps not as successful is the mental aspect of things. And I do agree to a point with that it is extremely important to have quote unquote a strong mental game when it comes to performance. But I think that's such a blanket statement for like what it actually encompasses.
It's interesting because what do you mean by that as like a blanket statement? Like it's just doesn't really get to the specifics of it, or?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is it, what works for one person may not necessarily work for another. And like being strong mentally can mean so many different things to so many different people. And I'm definitely figuring out a lot about myself recently. And I don't think that this podcast is just happening by chance as well, about, right, especially talking about the mental side of things, that I'm exploring a lot about myself in that aspect, kind of outside of sport. Myself at this point in time. So I think that it's definitely come at a good time.
I love how you mentioned that it's outside of sport as well, because the principles or the strategies or the theories about sports psychology, for example, even though it's like a super technical term, I don't love it too much, but just the sports psychology of being an athlete, it applies to life in general. Like your confidence on that track, your confidence in the weight room, whatever it may be, it bleeds into, I got to imagine, to the confidence in your personal life and the confidence in your relationships.
It definitely can. But what I found with athletes is that we're very good. Like at the end of the day, we're performers, like any kind of athlete, whether you're playing football or bobsleigh, or any type of sport out there. Like at the end of the day, we're entertainers. We're there to entertain the people through what we do as what we deem, as sport, and thankfully for me, people like to enjoy watching bobsleigh. Otherwise it wouldn't really be a sport. It would be more of just kind of like a hobby for people, or a pastime. And so as entertainers, if you think of an entertainer as someone like an actor, then that's what they do, is they act. They're the ones, they're putting on a face or a show for other people to enjoy. And I think that that's something that people don't realize that athletes do. And they may be, you speak about how the confidence of being an athlete can help, or definitely kind of flows over into your personal life or into your life outside of sport. It definitely can, but there are also many examples out there where people are struggling with their own personal life, but still having a very successful career, because athletic career, because they're great actors and entertainers.
Mm-hmm. I've never thought of it that way, but it clicks in my head. And as you're saying that, it kind of, I think back to all the different athletes that I've talked to, and I don't think they've come out and actually said that, but I think kind of the underlying message to a lot of all is being an entertainer, being an actor. And for you personally, is there any difference between Chris on the bobsleigh track versus Chris in his personal life?
I think there's a lot of differences and a lot of similarities. I am very, like you said, I've given some candid interviews in the past, and a lot of them have kind of put me in hot water with with the media or with the with my federation or whomever, right? And I think that I try and live my life somewhat like that, unapologetic, and kind of speak how I feel, be open and honest about it. But there are definitely some things about my personal life that I keep to myself, and I'm not, or I don't feel comfortable sharing, and I'm only just starting to kind of open up to people about that, which might seem as a surprise given the way that I am as an athlete, or the way that I kind of am perceived as an athlete.
I like the authenticity piece. I think the one thing I've kind of noticed is a lot of people, they're scared of showing their true colors or what their true passions are, whatever it may be, because their fear of judgment of others, or their fear of being made fun of. But I think it's harder, and even though it might not seem like it in the moment for anybody that's dealing with being authentic or putting themselves out there, I think it's harder to continue to lie to other people about who you are, rather than just be true to yourself and just be that authentic person. I mean, I see so many just athletes that I kind of coach and consult with, and they really struggle being authentic on the ice. I deal with a lot of hockey players. They have that certain style of play that they want to play, but they struggle to do it because they're worried of what other people will think if they make a mistake trying to play flashy or trying to make that extra move or whatever. But I got to imagine in the long term, it's harder for an athlete to continually to lie to other people about kind of like their style of play. You kind of know what I'm getting at there, rather than just being true to who themselves.
Yeah, 100%. And you see it a lot like you're talking about in hockey, in professional sport, especially if you're someone that, maybe you don't have a big name to yourself, and you're trying to kind of conform to what the masses want from you, and I think that's when it comes down to kind of interviews and speaking about kind of how you felt about a performance, or what, I go back to that interview in Pyeongchang, and I didn't really articulate myself very well at the time, because I was torn between saying what I actually wanted to say and what I felt was the right thing to say, knowing that I would be criticized either way by what I was about to say. And people see that, like you said, in the style of play on the ice or on a football field, because people know that they are going to be criticized on either what they're saying or how they're saying it with their athletic ability, whether it be with a stick and a puck, or with a football or a basketball or a tennis racket, things like that.
I always speak to some of the younger athletes too, and I tell them, no matter what you do, once you get to a certain level of junior hockey, whatever it may be, or elite baseball, or even professional or college ranks, when you have that spotlight on you, there's always going to be criticism about you. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter how well you play, no matter how poorly you play, there's always going to be someone out there criticizing you. So I just tell them, just play the way you want to play, and just say what you want to say. Like, just be authentic to who you are, within reason, of course. I mean, you don't want to go out there and just start slandering people or anything, but just be true to who you are, because no matter what you do, there's going to be critics out there. So you might as well just do what you want to do, basically. Yeah,
no, I understand that 100%. And I think that the more you're put into the spotlight, the more of a bigger name that you are, obviously the more critics there are going to be, and the more people that will support you, but also the more people that will kind of try and cut you down. And I feel like there's I don't know if it's some kind of weird wiring in human nature, but people love to see people succeed, but they also love to see people kind of fall from the top as well. You know what I mean? And people love an underdog and things like this. And, and I'm sure I've had that in the past too, whether it be like watching a Super Bowl and being like, man, I want this team to win because I don't want to see that team win anymore. They've been winning too much, or whatever it is. Right. It happens a lot. And I think that what we forget as spectators or as people that are passionate about a sport is that those people that are playing the sport or giving the interview or whatever it is, they have a lot going on in their life, and we only see like 0.5%, not even that, 0.1% of what's actually happening in their life. And they could be dealing with a lot of other things that's going on in their life to have gotten to that point. And so we shouldn't be so quick to judge on either a performance or an interview or something along those lines.
Exactly. I always chuckle. I mean, I think it's part of just sports media and sports fandom in general is like like somebody sitting in their armchair and playing manager and just like criticizing whoever it is, right? The moves they're making, or an athlete making a certain play or not making a certain play.
But, exactly. Like how could that person have missed that play or that was such an easy, like, how did they mess up so badly? You know what I mean? And it's like, hey, people are human, the athletes, they're human too. Right. And whether or not it was, something, a mental aspect of things that caused them to miss that play or not, it doesn't matter. It all that matters is that, like, they're out there, they're performing, they're entertaining, and what we see is a face of what's going on for that small snapshot of their life, and then they go home and deal with whatever else is going on in their life too.
Exactly. Earlier on, you kind of mentioned how, a strong mindset for one individual may be a different definition for a strong mindset for another individual, and just kind of the individuality amongst the mental side of things. For you particular, how do you define like a strong mindset for yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that it's ever evolving too, because, we grow as people and we grow as athletes as well. And so I remember when I first got into the sport, into bobsleigh, everyone was, like, as a pilot, you have to be super focused on exactly, what your plan is for the race, what you're going to be working on, and all these kind of steps in order to execute like the perfect run. But I've slowly grown over time to realize that, like, a perfect run is not achievable. And I think that, the bobsleigh super fans out there will be like, wow, I saw so-and-so do a perfect run. But if you speak to any of the bobsleighers, we're always correcting something. It's never exactly perfect how we want the run to be. And knowing that gives me a lot of freedom to I guess not beat myself up about not ever having this perfect run, and just trying to be good and not great. Because trying to be great is not achievable. And great being that perfect run, it's not an achievable goal for me. But so long as I'm good, my good might be better than someone else's good, or it might not be as good as someone else's good. But if I can be good, then I can win races. And going into races knowing that all I have to be is good, then it gives me a lot of kind of peace, knowing that, I don't have to execute every little single thing to win this race.
Right. I was going to ask, was there a point in your career where this growth mindset that you kind of talk about really started to click in as to how important it is? A piece of adversity that you went through, or just any challenging race where afterwards it kind of maybe sunk in a little bit more, just how important the mental side of things is?
I think that it was a long time into my career. I started in 2007, so I've been bobsledding for quite some time here, but it wasn't until the last kind of 4 or 5 years that I realized this. And I think that I did after realizing that, like, yes, I'm a bobsledder, but there's a lot more to me than being a bobsled pilot, and realizing that this is, again, such like a very small snapshot of my life. And I can choose to, I have the choice, and people have the choice on how they want to feel within that small snapshot of their life. So, yes, like bobsledding, it's stressful. We have people's lives in our hands. We're trying to win medals, not just for ourselves and our teammates, but for our country as well at an Olympic Games. But this also should be a lot of fun too.
Right.
And if we're not enjoying it, then perhaps it's not what we should be doing. And I think that choice that I've made, that hey, let's enjoy what we're doing. I came up with this motto that fun is fast. And if I'm having fun and enjoying the experience that is bobsledding, then I'm going to be fast down the track. And I think that really kind of helped change the way that I look at competitive sport.
Right. And I think for a lot of athletes too, sometimes what I'll do with them when I first start working with them, if I realize they're really mentally struggling with their game and they have that mindset where everything has to be perfect, I try and shift their mindset a bit that perfect doesn't really exist per se, in terms of an outcome, because like you said, you can always be faster, you can always be stronger, you can always push yourself to get better and better. But I tell them at the beginning that the perfect run, the perfect game, whatever it may be, is the game or the run where you had fun. As long as you had fun, then it's perfect, because that at the end of the day, I think for a lot of athletes, especially as they get higher and higher up and more of that pressure comes in, the medals, awards, the money, whatever it may be, a lot of those external factors start to play a role in their motivation, the fame, the money, whatever it is, the cars.
Yeah.
And they could potentially stray away from that internal motivation and why they actually got into the sport in the first place, because they enjoy it so much. So it's just a little something I do with a lot of the younger athletes, is I tell them, think of perfection, not as the outcome, but as the process. And if your process is on point and you have fun with the process, then any outcome that you get should just be a cherry on top. But that banana split should be that perfection.
Yeah, I like that. It's really good. And I think that I hope that they would kind of take that on, not just at the early stages of their career, but maybe look back at that conversation in the later stages of their career. And, you speak about the outside pressures of fame and money, cars. This doesn't happen in bobsleigh. You know what I mean? People don't know who I'm walking down the street here in Vancouver. There's a lot of hockey players. I live downtown. I see not right now, but in the summertime, I'll see some hockey players walking around, and I see people that's so-and-so, you know what I mean? Walking his dog. And, then there's me just walking around. No one knows who I am. You know what I mean?
Which is probably a good thing in some scenarios.
Oh, 100%. But that's kind of the beauty. It's a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. But the thing that I love about it is that I can't stray away from the love of the sport by any outside pressures of fame and fortune and all this kind of stuff, because that doesn't come along with my sport. So if I don't love my sport, there's nothing else. What else is keeping me in the sport? Right.
Well, where did that kind of love and passion for bobsleigh come from? Because it's not a traditional sport, I'm assuming. I'm not a bobsleigh connoisseur, but it's not something that kids grow up going to bobsleigh camp when they're 4 or 5 years old, right? So like a hockey player could, or a soccer player could.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not and I grew up in Australia too, right? So it's even more bizarre, right? That I can find this love for a sport. And a lot of people would look at my career and be like, wow, this guy's been in the sport for 14 years. He must really love it. Which I do, but I didn't for at least 2 or 3 years of that. And the first few years of being a bobsledder at any level, particularly the grassroots level though, but at any level, is very difficult, because it's such a bizarre and strange sport with a lot of strange people in it. I know that I'm a little different, but there are a lot of, it attracts this person that has a little bit of a different mind to them, because it is so strange, and there is such an obscure draw about it that that one can, if one's going to stay in it for such a long time, then there has to be this love for it that you kind of create over time. And like I said, I didn't love it initially, because it's tough, like what I was living in Calgary, and training at 9 o'clock at night is when we would start training, and it's winter in Calgary. It's cold out there. You know what I mean?
Dark by 4 probably.
Exactly. I don't really know what I'm doing. Like you're getting beat up, and no one wants to get in your sled because you're a brand new driver, and you don't know. You're not having these perfect runs, or these what we thought at the time were perfect runs, and so you're whacking things and banging and crashing, and like people are like, they're not hopping out of the sled at the bottom. Right. They're like limping out of there, like, oh my god, do we have to go again? I'm like, yes please, like just 2 runs today, thank you. And I really wish I had a list of all the people that have been in my sled over the last 14 years, because there's over 100 people for sure. Like at that entry level, I was getting people that I just met to jump in my sled. My boss jumped into my sled, like just randoms, whoever I could get, basically just dead weight is all. I just needed weight back there. You know what I mean? And I'd beat them up, and then I'd send them home, and then they probably would never come back again. And that's tough to do. Like I said, it's 20 below in Calgary, 9 o'clock at night, and you're preparing your sled by yourself and out there in the cold just to get a couple runs down the track and kind of learn this sport. And if there's not a passion or some sort of external motivation, like going to an Olympic Games or becoming an Olympic athlete or a full-time athlete or whatever it is, then it's very difficult. It's a very difficult sport to want to stay in, especially at those entry levels.
I was going to ask what made you push forward through those couple of years of it not being fun, but then I think you mentioned it there. It's just that was your passion or something that you wanted to go forward with. So it kind of made me think about the difference between passion on a deeper level and quote unquote fun on a surface level. And just that distinction for athletes, and to follow that deep inner passion rather than that surface level fun.
Yeah, exactly. And it has evolved into surface level fun, because now, I really enjoy, I go to a new track, I learn the track. It's fun to be challenged in that way. And it's fun to see competitors from other countries. It's fun to keep challenging yourself on tracks that you've been through for years and years and years. And I'm always learning something in the sport too. And I think that's the cool thing about it, is that there's always something to be learned. And that's fun as well, right? But at that, in those first couple of years when it's a grind out there, I'm really stubborn when it comes to that's the kind of personality I have. I will stick at something. If I have this goal inside, I just don't give up, regardless of how much pain it's causing me or anguish or whatever. And I had a goal of as a young child of being an Olympic athlete, and I wanted to do it I wanted to be a track and field athlete, a sprinter, and I just wasn't fast enough. And I never really gave up on that dream of being an Olympic athlete. And then this opportunity had presented itself, and I'm like, wow, that still could be a reality here. And I will be stubborn in making that dream come true.
That's a perfect example of you can't ever plan for too much in life. I mean, here you are with dreams of, I'm assuming, being a track and field athlete for Australia, and now being a bobsleigh Olympian for Canada. I mean, I think from the outside, it seems two such different things: track and field in a summer sport, and bobsleigh in a winter sport, for two very, very different countries. But probably for you, that inner passion is still the same, whether it's track and field, whether it's bobsleigh, whatever you do, it's that passion for getting on the Olympic stage, that passion for being the best version and form of yourself is what's similar between everything.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you see people, that's why there's so many initiatives too. We have a great initiative that the COC has. It's called Game Plan. And it helps to transition athletes between amateur athletes in Canada here, between being an athlete and like, what's your game plan to like transition into, the real world? It's because we don't want to give up being an athlete. We have this passion, this inner passion. And, like I said, I'm 14 years into this career, and I'm 37. My body is like, what are you doing to me still? It's some days I'm waking up and I'm, limping to get to the bathroom, and not because I'm injured, just because, my body is just like, come on, man, like, what are you doing here? But I have this internal passion that just wants to keep going because we, I say we as athletes, we love this competitive nature. We have this internal passion that we want to continue doing this for, as long as we can.
And it's so tough too, I think, for athletes to step away because their sport has been their identity for so long. That's how people recognize them as. That's the conversations that they've had, like their day to day. It's all about that sport, and then to have that all taken away and just like from one day to the next, and then you have to kind of revamp your life and look at building it almost kind of from the ground up. Unless an athlete has like put those like different hobbies or passions or business ventures or whatever it may be in place throughout their career, so that when they step aside, they can it's an easier transition. A lot of athletes, I think, can probably attest to this, that they may have stayed into their sport a bit too long because they're just scared of losing that identity, and they're scared of being known of not competing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a worry that a lot of athletes have, and something that I always try to I'll say address. I try and address it when I'm speaking to other athletes. I try not to get into the sport talk with other athletes, even with other bobsledders. Like I don't want the first question or the first conversation to be like, hey man, how's training? Or, hey, how was your season? Or whatever. Because I know that as an athlete myself, I get this question all the time when I see someone after a season. I'm catching up whether for dinner or I bumped into them on the street, and they're like, hey man, I saw your season. Like, how was it? Man, you're preparing for the games and whatever. And like, I don't fault them for that, because that is my identity as who they see me as, right? But I always like to try and dive a bit deeper with other people and ask, like, what else is going on in your life? Like how, what other things are bringing you that passion or that excitement, whether it be hobbies or interests or things like that. And that's kind of more what I want to talk about because that's what I want to try and, understand more about myself and who I am as a person.
Leave those surface level questions for the sports journalists or the media or whatever. At the end of every NHL game, at the end of every Toronto Maple Leafs game that I watch, they ask, how'd you think you guys played, or whatever it may be? How do you feel after scoring?
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I don't mean to like bag on the hockey players about this. But some interviews that I give, I call them hockey interviews. And I walk away from them and I'm like, oh man, I just gave like the ultimate hockey interview where someone says, so Chris, like, 7th place today. Tell me how you thought. Tell me how you feel about that. And I say, yeah, like the boys pushed really well today. And, we just couldn't find the speed in the track. Yeah, a couple problems through the upper corners, but, all in all, we're really excited with the way we're progressing, and just looking forward to next week's race. And I'm like, I walk away and I'm like, what a stupid answer. Like, well, come on. Yeah. And again, I don't mean to rag on the hockey players about it, but they give these interviews all the time, about pushing pucks up the board and, making sure that defense is strong because that's where we're going to win the games and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh man, I did not want to give any more of these interviews.
I love that. Is there anything you're doing day to day, or any kind of tips or strategies or practices that you've learned in the past year or looking to incorporate in your day-to-day life that have been really helpful with your mental game, not only in bobsleigh, but just in your personal life in general?
Yeah, I think I preach this a lot, but I don't actually take on the advice myself as much as I should, which I think is it's something that happens to a lot of people out there. But I tell people I believe a lot in the power of positive self-talk. And again, giving this interview right now, I somewhat feel like a bit of a hypocrite because of a few things I'm going through right now, but I do still believe that it is so valuable in the way that we can change our performance on the track or football field, basketball, whatever it is, and also our performance in our mind as well. And the way that I like to, the way that I like to bring it across to people is to talk to yourself like you're on a first date. And what I mean by that is that if I was to, meet a girl for coffee or something like that, and it's first date, and and I see her walking by or walking up to me, and I stand up and I say hello or whatever it is, and I'm trying to win this girl over, right? So I'm going to compliment her on something like, "Oh wow, I really like your dress," or "Wow, your hair looks really nice," or something like that, right? So what I mean by talking to yourself like that is that we need to compliment ourselves on what we're doing and our abilities and how we're performing, and not always look at the things we're doing wrong, but focus more on the things we're doing right, or the things that excite us with our sport. And so when I'm analyzing a race, when I do debrief afterwards, I'm not looking for the mistakes that I made. I'm more looking for the things that I did right. And trying to use that kind of positivity to move into the next race and really feel like I am growing or moving forward with more of a positive mindset instead of dwelling on those negative things. And I know it sounds very to me, it sounds very cliche, but it is very easy to fall back into this kind of negative loop that we get into of like, man, I just need to nail corner 4. Like, why can't I get that exit steer right? And it's like, whoa, you're nailing 1 to 3 and 5 to 16. So like, again, going back to being good and not great, like I can't be perfect on the track. And so giving myself a break in that sense, or like, not being so hard on myself, has definitely helped me in the mental aspect of things.
I love the way you put that self-talk piece, because it's a lot more relatable than the way I say it. I always say it like, talk to yourself the way that you want people to think of you as, which is like a lot of words and is jumble mumble. Like talk to yourself, that positive self-talk, like you would want somebody else to think of you as. Like if you want somebody to think of you as like this great athlete, as this great person, as this confident, authentic person, talk to yourself that way. But the date piece, I think, can relate to a lot more people. Like you want to date with somebody, you want them to, as you're hyping up that person, you want to hype up yourself as well.
Of course. You're trying to get that second date, Right. So how do you get that second date with yourself? You got to tell yourself how good you are.
Would this traditionally be something that you do if you were to self-talk before a run? Would this be something that you do right up until you guys leave that track, or do you put a pause to it kind of leading up to it and just allow it to be more of like a blank slate before the actual race starts?
Yeah, more of the latter there. I would leave it kind of until the day before, really get a lot of that positive reinforcement until the day before. But then when I'm showing up to the track, I kind of fall back into that motto of fun is fast, So I like to joke around with my teammates and with other competitors. I like to listen to music that makes me feel happy and alive, and just really enjoy it. What I've found really, really works for me a lot is that I try and take like 5 minutes just before I start warming up. And we go to some beautiful places in the world. We're in St. Moritz in Switzerland. We're in Bavaria, in Germany, in the Alps in Austria. Sometimes we're in France. All these, like I said, really beautiful places. So it can be easy to find a spot where I can just look out and be like, wow, like look where I am, and just try and think of some things that I'm grateful for in this moment. And I'm grateful to be competing for Canada. I'm grateful that I get to, at 37 years of age, still be an athlete and live a healthy lifestyle, to have friends who are also my competitors, to be able to look upon these mountains and, just be able to compete in this beautiful sport that I love. And when I create when I create this feeling of gratitude before I even start the race, then the outcome of the race isn't really that important, to me at least. The outcome is whatever it is. Like, I can't change the outcome. I know I will always give 100%. I'll always push as hard as I can. I'll always drive as best as I can. And I know that my teammates will as well. And whatever the outcome is, the outcome is. And we can't change that based on how we of the percentage of work we did. Because I know that everyone is trying their best. And so if I know that at the end of the race, that I'm still very grateful to be here in this beautiful country and competing for Canada and doing a sport that I love, it gives me a sense of relief that the outcome will not, regardless of the outcome, I'm grateful for where I am in life. And I think that that's really important going into a race.
Like you said, you and your teammates are always giving that 100% effort, and all of your competitors, I'm sure, are giving their 100% effort as well. And some days your effort is just better than, not better, I want to say, the execution of that effort sometimes is better than the others, and you get that podium finish. And some days the other competitors' execution of their efforts is better, and they get that podium finish. But as long as you're giving that 100% effort, I think that's where a lot of people's mindset should go in terms of judging if they're pleased with their result. That if you just tried your best, I mean, it might not be always the outcome that you want, but I think it's really hard for somebody with a healthy growth mindset to beat themselves up over giving their 100% effort, because that's all that you can really control is just your own effort.
Yeah, exactly. And our coach talks about being free a lot, and what I get from how he speaks about this is being free in your own mind so that you can sleep at night, regardless of the outcome or the result of the race. And he talks about, when you step to the line and you're about to race, if you were to ask yourself, have you done all the training that you could? Did you put in the maximal effort that you did throughout all of the training? Have you prepared your equipment the best you can? Have you studied the track as best as you can? Have you done everything that you could to have the best outcome that you can possibly have on that race day? And if the answer is yes, then you're free. You're free from any negative thoughts that could enter your mind, because you know that you've done everything that you can to have the best possible outcome. And there is nothing else that you could have done to change that outcome. And so you're free to move on with whatever the outcome is. It's
like living with no regret. Like, if you just gave all your effort, then there should be no regret, and you're not up at 3 or 4 a.m. wondering, what if I did this different, what if I did that different, or what if I just tried this harder. You just give your effort, and I love that a lot. I think that's a beautiful analogy to end this interview off, Chris. I really appreciate you taking some time today. I had a blast. Wrote a lot of notes for myself to just incorporate not only in my sport life, but my personal life as well in terms of mental tips. So I greatly appreciate your time, Chris.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Adam.